In the recent One Piece chapter, chapter 1107, we begin setting up for what looks to be the final fight of the Egghead arc, Luffy and Sanji versus Saturn and Kizaru, with Sanji having blocked Kizaru's laser twice now, and getting Kizaru to make quite the reaction. It seems Oda is ready to once again put the spotlight on our boy Vinsmoke Sanji yet again. So in wake of all this, why not pit him against a foe from the previous arc, King the Wildfire? How does Sanji stack up to him now after all his power-ups, and can he even beat him in a 1v1? Let's get into it. Sanji and King have had two altercations during Wano, but each of them having different versions of Sanji in play. In chapter 988, we see King clash with an invisible Sanji with his raid suit on, showcasing King's superior observation haki and speed when compared to Queen, who is right next to him but couldn't react quite as well as King could, as well as Page 1, who we see fight raid suit Sanji early on in Wano. This clash is pretty short-lived though, as King then tries to split Sanji in half, but fails to do so thanks to the raid suit's durability, leaving Sanji injured afterwards. Pretty obvious, but this makes King stronger than raid suit Sanji, and raid suit Sanji relative or stronger than the Flying Six. The only reason I do say relative though, is because Page 1 didn't seem too phased by the raid suit Sanji's attacks and vice versa, and the fight then gets off-screened. But I don't think it's too wild to say that Sanji would be stronger than all the Flying Six, especially when members fight characters like Frankie or Robin, who should be weaker than Sanji in base, let alone the raid suit. So I lean closer to Sanji being stronger than the Flying Six. The second encounter is also off-screened, and we only see the outcome in chapter 1022, but it's easy to discern why it happened. While Sanji was fighting Queen at the performance floor, Marco also fights King at the same time, but with Marco eventually succumbing to King, leaving Sanji to take on both lead performers at the same time, but he's put down quite convincingly. This Sanji, however, is different to the one I mentioned before though. Of course he's got no raid suit, but this Sanji is now slightly mutated thanks to wearing the raid suit back in the first instance that I mentioned. Therefore he is now stronger. And we see that when he survives Queen's brachial coil, or when he just tanks bullets shot at him. I have this Sanji above the raid suit Sanji from before, since he does force Queen into his hybrid form and even makes him use armament haki as well. While raid suit Sanji clashed somewhat evenly with Page 1, but with Sanji having the upper hand, I'd still put this new Sanji above raid suit Sanji. So our scale so far goes something like this. King is stronger than this new mutated Sanji, who's stronger than raid suit Sanji, who is stronger than all the Flying Six members. And if we put Queen and Marco into it, it'll look something like this. King is stronger than Marco, who's stronger than Queen, who's stronger than this new mutated Sanji, who's stronger than etc, etc. I put Marco above mutated Sanji because he handles the King and Queen 2v1 better back in chapter 1006, but also because it's implied he's been fighting with King for at least a few dozen minutes, since that's about the time it takes Sanji to arrive at the performance floor, from when Lord teleports himself and Zoro from the roof. Being able to fight with King for 30 to 45 minutes in addition to all he's already done at Onigashima prior to this fight makes me put him above Queen. However, it does not put him above King, at least for me. Marco seemingly doesn't have the power to really face King at all, even during his 30 to 45 minute off-screen fight with him. This is later backed up when King is able to block advanced Conqueror Haki attacks from Zoro, but with his flame on. King of Hell Zoro's attack power should definitely surpass Marco's rather convincingly, since Zoro of course beat King with it, and even scares King, at least Zoro claims. Sanji finally completes his transformation that he started ever since he took off the raid suit, which awakens the latent power of his Germa bloodline. He gains an exoskeleton, more muscle, more speed, and add the color of armament to his exoskeleton, and his body can now even withstand Hall of Flames. With this new power, Sanji then beats Queen with relative ease, putting him above Queen on the scale we established previously. But does it put him over King? King's got all defeats mentioned from before, but his main fight is the one against Zoro. King makes pretty easy work of a pre-King of Hell Zoro, and maybe even easier than Marco, with Zoro saying he'd die if he doesn't figure out how to beat King if the fight kept going as it was. I'd put this pre-King of Hell Zoro as weaker than Marco, but it's debatable where he stands in relation to Queen, but I think it could go either way. However, me personally, I'd say this Zoro, with everything put into an Ashura, would be stronger than Queen, since he does have enough haki to scar Kaido permanently. And our scale now goes something like this. King of Hell Zoro is stronger than King, who is stronger than a pre-King of Hell Zoro, who is relative or slightly stronger than Marco depending on whether he uses Ashura or not, who is stronger than Queen, who is stronger than a mutated Sanji. Now the question of today is, where does this Germa enhanced Sanji fit on the scale? Now for the purposes of this video, I may be taking a slightly more lenient approach on where Sanji stands, but let's find out regardless. Most readers or viewers of One Piece subscribe to the idea that Zoro and Sanji aren't too far apart in power, but Zoro always taking the edge over Sanji. Now, if Oda is really intent on this dynamic, and he probably is, Sanji's about to fight Kizaru, I would put the blue flames of Sanji over the blue flames of Marco. Since I don't really think Oda's trying to have two whole characters in between Zoro and Sanji, I just don't think that's what his intention is with this dynamic. But does he beat King? Well, in order for Sanji to do any significant damage against King, it'd have to be with his flame off. If Zoro with his advanced Conqueror's Haki Amp doesn't think it's worth attacking King with his flame on, I don't see how Sanji would have the attack power needed to even force King to use his flame off mode that many times. We see King parry the King of Hell Purgatory Onigiri, so Ifrit wouldn't be too much of an issue for King, I believe. A possible argument I can see being made is if Sanji could outspeed King, since he does get caught by Marco a few times in chapter 1006, and since I have Sanji above Marco, he could force King to use his flame off mode a couple of times more in order to hit him. But I don't think his speed eclipses King by that much. Queen is able to catch Sanji off guard a couple of times when he uses moves like Henry Queen or Winch Queen. King does have a tendency to turn his flame off though, even if it might not be particularly beneficial for him, so Sanji might get a lot more chances to use Ifrit on King than Zoro if you consider Sanji's speed compared to Zoro. King took 3 shots from Zoro using Advanced Conqueror's Haki at all times, with his flame off before he lost, so Sanji would have to land a lot more Ifrit kicks than that. Sanji's durability would also let him last longer than Marco at least, and make him less susceptible to damage from the Imperial Flames thanks to his exoskeleton. And those are pretty much all the factors that I think should be considered in this matchup, but let me know if you think any different in the comments. I personally would give King the edge in this matchup, but there's a way you can argue for Sanji, and he'll be a lot more depending on how he performs in the next couple of chapters, most definitely. But that's all for me. Thank you very much for watching. Bye bye.